Welcome to the Ausländer. So, welcome to another episode of the Ausländer. Today, I'm really happy to have Parimal here. Parimal, it's original from Kathmandu, Nepal, but actually raised up in Paris, France. Hi, Parimal.
Welcome. Hi, guys. Thank you. Yeah. I have to say, you'll notice that I'm gonna interrupt people a lot. Not one of my qualities, but I was raised both in Kathmandu and then my adult years in Paris.
Nice. Just as a short introduction, Parimal and I actually are currently working while the time of this recording together. He's also a UX UI designer, another one in this podcast, a lot of UX UI designers. It looks like I bring colleagues.
No, but it's really funny because when we have our video calls for our weeklies or things like that, it's only the UX designers who've got podcasts and have like studio microphone setups. I think that some people genuinely now think that if you're UX, you need to have a professional sound setup. So that's sort of our fault, I think.
Yes, exactly. And maybe think that it's a requirement to have a podcast after being a UX UI designer, but
it's true. I mean, it's true though. We all know it's true.
Just explain us a little bit like you moved from Nepal to France at what age? Why this movement?
Right. Okay. So actually, there's a country in between the two countries. Mm-hmm. So after high school, and I did I don't know if your listeners would probably know the British GCSE system. It's sort of the high school diploma system. So I did that in Nepal. Mm-hmm. And so after that, I had to go to university. There weren't very many options in Nepal for someone like me. And when I say someone like me, it's someone who doesn't really know what he wants to do, but certainly not the things but it's not the traditional things, right? If my parents were very, very traditional, they'd be very disappointed with me, but they weren't, so it's fine. And so I went to the US for university, for college. Okay. And then, that's a 4-year program. And I happened to go on a sort of, what do you call that? A study abroad semester. It's a bit like Erasmus, but from the US to Paris. And then, I went there, enjoyed my 6 months, told myself I'd never go back to that university. And then 6 months later, I joined that same university for the master's program. So that's how that happened. Yeah.
So at the age of 18, you moved to the United States when you finalized the high school education in Nepal. So actually you grow up with your family until the 18, until you were legally an adult, let's say like this.
Some would argue I'm still not legally, not in my mental mental age is still not an adult, but yeah, sure.
That wasn't my words, but
self-burn. I'll do it all by myself.
So where did you go in the United States?
Well, it was actually it was this part of the US. Well, the region is the Northeast, New England. Mm-hmm. The old England wasn't doing it for me. So it's New England in Massachusetts. So the western edge of Massachusetts. I know that some people will know this word, Amherst. I didn't live there, but it was a place called Northampton, Amherst, that area. There's like a consortium of 5 schools, and I went to one of those schools.
Okay, cool. And
Very
you spent there 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. Well, 3.5, considering that a part of that time was spent in France. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And which career did you study in?
Well, this is perhaps when why I have to explain a little bit what sort of college I went to. It's called, Hampshire College is the name of the college. And it's not, the reason I can't answer that question directly is because I didn't go to a college that's a very normal one. So normally you go to a college, you pick a specialty and then you study that. I went to a college where you have to design your own course, where there are no grades and no exams. So for people like me, not into the traditional education system. So I studied a number of different things, but my final sort of what we called our Division 3 project, because we had to come up with new names for everything, it was like split into two: foreign languages, so French, Italian, and Chinese, and then interactive design, which sort of led me to what I do now and what you do as well.
Nice. That's okay. That's a different kind of a traditional university of like, I don't know, you enter a 4 years course and you know that you are going to study law or medicine or whatever. So why this choice? Like it's a really variety of things, like coming from languages to something which might be like either more like design, artistic, or more like language based. It's absolutely different.
Yeah, that's one of the critical points. So just to give you an idea of where I was, maybe even a couple of months, maybe 6 months before I officially sort of left and joined a university program. I don't know how long it took between the time I submitted my applications and got the responses, but 6 months, let's say, before I went to university, I went to the principal of my school, who also did some sort of college counseling. And I told her that I wanted to become an actor and wanted to go to the Juilliard School in New York. I didn't say that as if, maybe I'm not going to get in. I said, I am going to go there. So I was a very cocky little high school student. And I said, I want to be an actor. She said, why didn't you think about it? And then tell me, tell me after a week what you think. And after 2 days, I was like, that was a stupid idea. And that went on. I wanted to be a graphic designer. I wanted to be a 3D artist. I wanted to study theater. I wanted to study physics. I was really, really all over the place. But the one thing I knew is that Nepal is in some ways a very traditional country, and sort of there's this notion that in many countries, you need to sort of know very early on in life. This is the case in France. You're meant to know before you enter college what you want to do. In fact, you have to even pick whether you want like the science or the economics and all that. I couldn't do that. Was it like that for you when you were young?
Yeah, it was actually in Spain and in Catalonia. The system works more or less the same. So actually, when you are 16, actually, you already choose for the last 2 years if you want to go to the scientific, technological, artistical branch or everything. And that will give you more possibilities to enter the university depending on the career also. So yeah. I completely understand you. I did a scientific 1 year, technological another year to end doing a design university career. So yeah, I completely understand that the being 16, 18 years old and having no idea what you really want to do at that point of time.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, exactly. So I wasn't able to sort of pick a route, and also I didn't really like sort of the traditional system of education. I was very lucky to be able to do the British GCSEs because the courses were a little more open, but still they were exam driven, and I'm a terrible exam taker. That's my excuse, because I might just be really bad at studying in general. But I thought I'm quite interested in things. I'm very interested and curious to learn about things, and somehow the education system was telling me that's not how you learn. That you need to sort of pass these exams, and then sort of based on your grades you have certain options, and that idea just didn't make any sense to me. So I was very drawn to sort of what we call liberal arts colleges, where this notion that to be a good scientist you also need to be good in the humanities. So learning poetry could actually help you become a better mathematician, for example, and I like that sort of cross-disciplinary, sort of very mixed environments, and that was exactly what the university course was like. So I was studying in my first year crime writing, because one of the things I wanted to do as a kid was also be a writer. Yeah.
Nice.
So so that's sort of why I picked that. What was really quite literally a hippie school.
So okay.
It was.
Okay. So well, it's just like when I imagine hippie school, I imagine other things, but yeah, sure.
It had all the other things as well. It was set up in the 70s, okay. And it was literally a hippie school.
Woodstock and a lot of marijuana.
That was exactly what the school was like. I'm not even kidding.
Okay, good. So you said that actually in Nepal you were following like the British system. Does it mean that you also had like school in English, or?
Yeah. Okay. All of my schooling from since I was since my kindergarten actually has always been in English. So the only subject that was taught in Nepali, which sort of is the official language of the country and technically my mother tongue, is Nepali. That's the only subject taught in Nepali. But the British, I have to specify that the British part of the education. So when I say British, it was not just the British curriculum, which was the case, but also my exam papers were sent to Britain to be marked.
Oh, okay. So it was really like a kind of British school, like in that sense.
Well, not really, because there was a British school, but that's like an actual British school. Ours was actually a very Nepalese school. But when you are part of the GCSE system, or in our case, it was the IGCSE, so the International General Certificate for Secondary Education or something. That's how it worked. And so the teachers were, a mix of local and from other countries. But that was the system. It was a very sort of well-defined system. And that was British. So when I say the history of the Second World War, it was very much a British point of view. Okay. Whatever that means.
I don't know. we learned the Spanish one, and it's we didn't participate in the Second World War, so yeah, sure.
No, it was fair.
We had other problems at that point of time.
Yeah, I heard about it.
So yeah, I just asked the question because, as you know, in this podcast, one of the topics that normally pops up, it's when you are in like the first movement that you do, because you've been in 3 countries. Actually, you've been to USA, you then went to France for the master and stayed in France for quite a long time, and now you're actually living in Berlin in Germany. But the first step, so the first country that you go, normally one of the topics that always raise up, it's the language. And in your case, you went to the United States. Of course, the kind of accent or the variation or dialect change, of course, but you speak English. So you already were speaking the language. So that was an advantage, I suppose.
Well, it was, but also I have to say that the American, there is no American English per se, but there are sort of certain words and certain ways of talking, sort of intonations that are very specific to America. And even though there wasn't like you mentioned, it was an advantage to actually be able to speak the language already. There were a couple of cases where I would say use a word like torch to mean a flashlight, and people would be imagining sort of sticks with fire, like flames in them, which didn't help because I came. Yeah, I know, Indiana Jones. It didn't help the fact that I came from Nepal, because they might have thought, well, maybe that's what he had in Nepal. I don't know. But like, when I said the words like dustbin, they're like, what's a dustbin? I was like, then I learned to say a trash can, like garbage, like trash can or a garbage. I still can't. What, garbage can? Maybe a trash can is the right word. So yeah, I had to learn this dialect, and but I enjoy it. I enjoy that. I used to have a much thicker American accent. I've lost it over the years. I'm not going to say thankfully. I just did. Whoops.
Well, actually, I know I've seen you talking both, and you have a quite a tricky way of languages. I know that you know quite a lot of languages, but in English, I've seen you being able to change from one accent to the other rather easily. So that's quite cool. I mean, I suppose you have the base of growing up with English in school. You went to the American style of school, of university, so you were able to learn another accent. But I wanted to ask, because you put in there some other languages that are really non-related, like Chinese. Where does this come from? Italian. French. If you went in France, I don't know. There was an idea of going to France. Maybe yes, maybe not. Why these three languages?
Good question. I have to say all of them are purely by chance. I mean, so now, right? So if I start from now and go back, now my two main languages are English and French. So English is the one I speak most of the time, the one I'm the most comfortable with, except when I'm talking about food and wine. Then it's French, right? And there are certain things in which case
stigma. Sorry.
No, but you can't. I mean, you can't say, like, if you say, I don't know, pavé de saumon avec son écrasé de pommes de terre. It sounds so lovely, right? The same thing would be in English. Would just be salmon with mashed potatoes, right? It doesn't sound that good, you know.
Right,
it doesn't sound. Also, okay, ja, Forelle, also wie heißt also Salmon? How do you say salmon in German? Actually, I don't know. I mean, it would be something like, let's say Forelle, which is a similar fish.
Lachs.
Trout.
It's Lachs.
Lachs, ja, danke. Yeah, so Lachs mit Kartoffelpüree. Actually, it sounds better in German than it does in English. So that's where we are at, yeah. So anyway, So as a kid, I mean, the reason I studied French is because I went to l'Alliance Française, the sort of the language institute, I suppose, the cultural institute that France has in Kathmandu. They have it all over the world. And I had a choice between learning French, Spanish, and I believe it was German at the time. I had some time after high school and before my university. And I went to visit different sort of language institutes, and I picked French purely because it had a bistro, and you could drink while you studied or after your classes. And so that's the only reason I picked French. It's purely by chance. It could have been German, could have been Spanish. I could have, decided to go to Barcelona.
Being honest, it sounds so Spanish and so German to be drinking while doing other things. But yes, it was the French Institute doing it. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, come on. I mean, it's there's quite excellent alcoholic drinks in France as well. So anyway, that's the reason I decided to learn French. And Chinese was because I never knew what to do in the summers in the US, because everyone goes home, don't they? And you don't know what to do. So someone said, well, you could go to China to learn Chinese. And I applied sort of on a whim, got accepted and got a scholarship. So the only thing I had to pay for was housing in China, which is not very expensive. They paid for my education and my flights. And so, I just went to China to learn Chinese 2 summers. There's
long?
no literally 2 summers. I spent 2 summers and I continued learning it in the US.
So 1 or 2 months in summer.
Oh, it was, so it was a month in 2019, a month in 2010. And between those two, and then after that, in the US, I just continued learning Chinese. All of which I am very happy to report I've forgotten completely.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's one of these languages that are, if you don't practice them and you don't see it often, I mean, it's not that you will never interact with, if you are in Germany, you never interact with French or Italian, for example, you will have colleagues or whatever, but it's rather difficult that you end interacting, well, in technology, actually not, but I don't know. I suppose if you don't train the language, you end losing it.
You lose it, yeah.
Great. Just quick introduction of the drink. I do this from time to time. As you said, that the alcoholic behavior of choosing French only because you could drink afterwards. We are drinking old-fashioned.
It's an old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned. Actually, it has been a really long time until I didn't drink this, but yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a very old person drink, isn't it? It's not it's not the hip crowd, right? You're not gonna get into like the most hip clubs because you drink old fashioned. But what do you think? Do you like it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong drink, let's say like this. So I would have 2 of them maximum in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the drink's got an interesting history because in the past it used to be made with actual sugar cubes and no ice, obviously, with stones and stuff, and it's evolved now. But what I like about it is it's such a simple, basic drink, and very basic flavors: Angostura bitters, whiskey, and
if you are in a country where Angostura is easy to find, you are okay. If you are in Greece,
you're right.
Like,
I mean, to be fair, it's not. You don't find it in the supermarkets. I have to go to like a
of course,
special place,
liquor store. Great. I think United States was like the university time, so I need to ask this question now.
Go on then.
Any crazy story during university in United States that you remember? Like, okay, this is a highlight.
Oh gosh, I mean, the problem is that there are too many, aren't they? I mean, well, I've got to say that the whole thing was a highlight in the sense that when I say I went to a hippie school, I don't sort of. I mean, that's just fact in the sense of, you mentioned Woodstock and marijuana. That's literally, I mean, most of my well, I suppose classmates, not really classmates, but most of the other students were, I mean, it's a very strange place. It was most of the people who studied there were quite rich. I mean, there's no other way of saying it because normally the cost of instruction there in America, as you know, for a private school is extremely, extremely high. If you don't have a scholarship, luckily I did. But if you don't have a scholarship, then you're paying about $50,000 per month, not per month, per year. And that's a lot. And so the kind of hippies that this college drew were very sort of quite well-off hippies. So it's a very bobo, essentially it's a very bobo crowd. But very, very much into sort of I knew one guy, absolutely fascinating. And he would go around barefoot, and he paid for a dorm room, right? So one of the college housing, he never used it. He slept in the woods because it's quite rural. He slept in the woods. I mean, literally camped out in the woods, even though he'd paid for a room, right? And then he would go out, and then every time we would meet up, we would discuss philosophy. So I believe he liked Nietzsche, and well, I don't know if he mentioned Sartre. I don't know whom he liked because I didn't really know much about philosophy at the time. And we would discuss philosophy with this gentleman. I use the word carefully, who lives in the forest. I mean, it sounds mad and it sounds like I'm making this up, but this was quite normal back in the day.
It's just like the kind of thing that you can imagine, like in a bag and so big and randomly country as United States to happen, to be honest. Like, yes, there is this kind of college feeling of hippie and whatever everywhere, but I suppose, and knowing how Americans how things are in America, that everything is big, like everything that happens in America, it's multiplied per 10.
Right.
I can imagine that was quite a shock.
Yeah, but I do have one. Anecdote, because that was not really an anecdote.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when you join a college or university, like in anywhere in the world, you have this orientation day or orientation week.
Yep.
So I went to the International Students Orientation Week, which was a week before the American students came in, presumably because you need the additional time to adapt to American life, which was a good idea, I think. So when we had the initial orientation thing, you meet people from all over the world, and the usual, where you're from, Czech Republic, China, everywhere. It's such an exciting time, really. You're meeting people from all around the world.
You had quite a lot of international people around, or
it was a very small group compared to the the international body was not as big as in other universities, but it was there people from all over the world, really. And so, all right, we got to know each other, and then the Americans came, and I don't think I was really prepared for that, because Americans are, I'm generalizing obviously, whenever you start a sentence like that, are so lovely. They're curious, they're lovely, and they're so open to talking to you, and they ask you questions, and it's not, I'm not like that as a person. I talk a lot, but often I'm very sort of.
But I'm not lovely.
I'm not. I don't do small talk without somehow like making someone awkward or offending someone. But the thing is, what?
No. It just so it's more like this chit chatting. You don't chit chat. You go to kill the other.
Exactly. My opening sentence could be, "What do you think about death?" Which apparently is not how you start sentences in a social setting, I've learned. So I mean,
not in the United States, definitely.
No, not in America in any case. And so I remember we were playing these. So now I'm on my second orientation week, but now with everybody, right? International and
American.
And so and the Americans. And so we've got this game where we're sort of going around introducing ourselves, blah, blah, blah. But we don't say things about ourselves. We just give hints. Eventually, I start talking to this guy. Let's call him Zach. It's a very American name. I like it, Zach. So and Zach, Zach, where are you from?
Sorry, but that Zach in German means the scrotum of the balls.
Yeah, okay. It does. Yeah, no, I didn't pick it for that reason, because you'll see in a while that he was absolutely lovely. So don't listen to him, Zach. You've got a lovely name. Don't listen to the mean host. But no, the thing is, so we're talking, and he's like, okay, so Zach, where are you from? Like, I'm from Wisconsin or wherever, right? Like he says where he's from. I was like, he asked me, so where are you from? And I say, I'm from Nepal. And he's like, right, Nepal. So like you're Italian.
No, shit.
Yeah, it was. I genuinely had a lost. At first I thought he was being sort of silly, right? But then that moment continued, and I didn't really know how to respond. I think I said yes, I am. I'm Napolitano.
Exactly. It's Nepal and Napoli. Yeah, the confusion came from here. Wow, that's incredible.
It's fair though. It's fair.
Yeah, well, I remember once in United States in North Carolina that I was also a kid, and when they asked me where I was from, and I said from Barcelona, they asked me how did I cross the border.
No, they did not.
Yes.
Did they?
Yeah.
The border? What border?
Because they thought I was from South America. So
oh gosh. Oh wow.
They thought I was an illegal immigrant, and because I speak Spanish. So that was well, but that was a kid. That was a fucking
That was a kid.
That was like I don't know, a 10 years old kid. So
it's good. It's good. I like it. I'm for these sort of things. I really enjoy them.
Okay, from now on, I will ask you if you are from Napoli.
I can't do the Napoli accent, unfortunately.
Nobody can besides the Napoli.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. With enough alcohol, I think even that can be fixed.
So, I think we will rather just jump to France. And first question, as you said, you were going there for 6 months first for like a kind of Erasmus program, even if it was not the Erasmus program, because of course they were coming from the United States, so it was not a European exchange. Did you go directly to Paris or?
Yeah. So it was an exchange actually. So the Erasmus students who wanted to go to the United States went to our college. So they were actually on there. In the Sciences Po, which is the university I went to, they call 3A. So it's the third year, troisième année. And Sciences Po, if you study there, you have to go abroad on your third year. It's just sort of a requirement. Mandatory, yes.
Crazy.
It's it's part of sort of having a student. So because Sciences Po is sort of quite an elite sort of college, isn't it? I mean, it's the college where pretty much every single French president has either studied or taught at or failed from, which is typically the case of Sarkozy, and he failed English. I don't know why I mentioned that. Anyway, but it's a fun sort of thing.
Nobody, no worries at all.
Yeah.
This podcast came political sometimes, so no worries.
Yeah, all right, that's all right then. And so and they were on the Trois to the United States, and then that allowed us to send some people to Paris, and I went there, and it was very intense. I mean, the undergraduate program, right, was, and I already spoke some French at that time because I'd studied it sort of throughout my college years in the United States. So I spoke what I thought I spoke French, and then I landed in Paris, and they don't talk the way you're taught. In fact, the way I speak now, French now, is perhaps not very comprehensible to someone. Yeah, it's full of slang, right? Like now I speak the Parisian slang, but at the time when I arrived, I didn't. And so that year was not very easy, because when you don't speak the language perfectly, it's very hard to integrate into sort of social groups and things like that. Yeah. So when I first went to Paris, that was the case.
Actually, that's a curious thing that I think it happens rather normally, like to absolutely everywhere, that you're learning a language in a formal way. You learn Italian in a school, or you learn German in a school, and then you go to that country, and of course the people doesn't talk of the British that you learn in school. It's not how if you go to Newcastle they will speak. So
no, certainly not Newcastle.
Definitely not. And that's something that it's really, really interesting. And it's just like there is people speaking like perfect academic language,
right?
But you might arrive to that country of the language that you speak, and then it's not, you are not able to communicate as fluently, I mean, I always put the same example, and I think I never speak a language good enough until I can make a joke and someone laugh of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's rather a mark in there, like I had a little bit of the opposite, actually. Like the languages that I speak, I think I don't speak any language academically properly. So I only speak slang of all the languages that I know.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
But it's really curious. So you really encounter this, because I and this maybe it's because of being in the frontier, being Catalan and being in the frontier with French. I really had the sensation that sometimes with France, it's even more high this level. So they are really, really exquisite in the language sense. They are really strict on speaking and really strict on if they don't understand you, they don't understand you on period, like.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, now it's interesting to compare my experience of when I first arrived to now, because now I'm in this very odd situation of having now become French, which also means I have inherited not just sort of the linguistic tendencies, but also the perception of sort of being quite arrogant, which was my initial perception as well. But now I understand that to be, I mean, don't even get me started about like selecting wine in France. In Germany, I went to a restaurant recently. This is unrelated, by the way. I'm just going off. I went to a restaurant, and this is always the case. I ordered a meal, and I say, okay, what do you recommend? And then, I say, what do you have? And they say, we have white or red. Oh, I was like, okay, so what red wines do you have? This is this. And I was like, well, I like this kind of wine. What do you recommend? And they're like, well, what do you like? Well, I mean, okay, so this is what I'm looking for. I was like, okay, I don't really know. Come on. No, but anyway, again, I know I sound pretentious. That was one of the requirements for getting the French nationality. I'm sorry.
It's officially a test. They send a sommelier to your place, and you need to be good at selecting wines.
I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But I literally talked about cheese in my interview in my national. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit. Yeah, it's brilliant. I think I got it immediately after that. But anyway. So, but what it is, a lot of people, when they go to France, they think that, if they try to speak French, usually people respond in English. And even if you have a certain level, even if your French might technically be better than a French person's English, they will probably insist sometimes on speaking to you in English. However, really? If you're in a group situation, actually, it's one of two things can happen. Well, one, either people, if you're in a group situation, everyone will just speak in French. I mean, they might say one or two things in English. Yeah, everything will be in French. It's rather
normal. I mean, it's French people, and you are the only person who is not speaking French. That's the case.
Yeah, but the whole reason I decided to learn German was I had the opposite experience where I was, celebrating New Year's in Leipzig, and a group of German people, and I was there, and all of them switched to English just because I was there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Very.
They were Berliners. Berlin, it's not Germany. We are already also talking in this
Leipzig,
podcast about this.
Leipzig.
And Leipzig.
Yeah, but still, it's I mean, university students, so yeah.
I suppose it's a cultural thing, but I meant like I had the experience in Paris, for example, to try to talk with someone in French, in my potato French, and
your French is quite good, I have to say.
No, it's not.
I mean, but you can. I mean, I can understand when you speak French.
Yeah, of course. Of course that's because it's potato.
Right.
The thing of trying to go there, and then they try to respond me in French, and I am not able to talk anymore, or I directly go with English, and they say, okay, I just speak French, and I don't switch. And even people that speaks English doesn't want to switch to French. That's my experience in Paris. Okay. And I must say, it's a Parisian. It's a thing that it happened in Paris. Of course, it happens in other places, but in Paris, I had like this feeling of it. And now you're saying quite the opposite. That the people were rather willing to talk in English, so it's surprising for me.
Okay, so no, and I have to nuance it a little bit. I mean, I went to a school where everyone had studied abroad, so keep that in mind, right? So the university setting. On the streets, you're right. It is the opposite. And the reason, well, some people think that's, because what's going to happen sometimes is people say, no, I don't speak English. And then you sort of push them. And even though there might be a very strong accent, you realize maybe the vocabulary is not that bad. And you're thinking, well, so you do speak English. But there's this French mentality. It's very present in the French psyche to not do something unless you're very, very good at it, or near perfect at it, right?
Excellence.
Exactly. But it's not a very positive thing. I mean, I taught English in France, and people would not speak English because they were worried about making mistakes. And I said, well, you're never going to learn English if you're worried about making mistakes, because, the native speakers make mistakes all the time. It annoys me, but what doesn't? So, it's really like, so in France, it's like people don't want to speak in English, not because they're arrogant. I mean, there are people who are arrogant like anywhere else in the world, but it's because they're worried that their English is not good enough. That's I think
there is
the main
perfectionism.
Exactly.
Society, let's say, like they really want to excellence on the thing that they are speaking, and then they just really want to speak that language properly before even trying to speak it.
Yeah.
But that's a big problem, because you never perfectionate it. You never perfectionate the language until you start speaking it. So.
Well, you and I are similar in the sense of I think we just throw ourselves into it. I mean, like we've spoken to each other obviously in English. We've done German, we've done French, and I believe we've done Italian in various states of inebriation. And I don't think we care. We've reached a point where if you're able to understand, because let's be honest, most of the things we say not that important. it's not that important.
Especially when we are drunk, definitely.
Exactly. The core of what we're saying is not that important. It's perhaps the spirit that's important in both senses of the word. So, yeah,
definitely. I mean, it's just a different perspective, but it's interesting to see it, that it's not like a kind of personal thing. It's happening in a society. It's happening in a cultural way, and it's happening. And it affects socially wise absolutely every individual on this fact.
Yeah.
Of course, there is exceptions in everything, and there is nobody exact to the rule. No, let's say like this. Just making a little bit of turnaround, like let's leave the languages out for a while.
Yeah.
how did it happen that you went for 6 months? Was your plan theoretically to go back to United States? That was your idea, and then somehow happened that you stayed in Paris, or?
Oh gosh, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I mean, this part genuinely embarrasses me because so I went to Sciences Po, again, a very, very reputed college. I didn't enjoy it. I hated it. It was very, very much like the education system in Nepal, very much exam-based, grades-based, and it just wasn't my thing. But I loved the people, and I loved being in Paris. And I thought that I could relate more to lifestyle, the mentality of people in Paris than I could in my little town in America. And definitely more than, I could relate to people in America more than I could relate to people in Nepal, which is a bit strange, but that was the reality. And then I could relate to people in Paris more than I could relate to people in the US. Okay. And in a very strange way, because Paris infuriated me, the way people behaved, the way people, it was this very odd thing of being like, I hate you, but damn it, you're cool, something like that. And
how old were you at that point of time? You were 22? Oh,
too old to have these thoughts. Yeah, 20, 22, 23.
Not too old at all. Like,
okay,
man, like, I don't know, trendy vibing, big city. You were coming from the United States rather in a small town, you were saying?
Rural. There were cows. I could hear cows at night.
So coming from a rural to a city like Paris, which is big for a city. It's not a United States city, but of course, the cosmopolitan vibe, it's different than the rural one. So
absolutely. I think you're right, actually. That might have played a huge role in it. But also it was very, very, I think what happened was that, I said at the end of those 6 months, I would love to come back to Paris, but I don't want to go back to this university. And then I went back to the United States after that, and I was just obsessed with France. I directed more of my studies, my courses, to be about France. And
but when did this chronologically happen? So you went 6 months, and then you needed to go back to United States
for 1 year
to finalize. So it was still remaining 1 year to finalize the college. So you went back for 1 year, okay, and then you get obsessed with France.
Yeah, and my plan after that 1 year was I was really into the startup scene at the time. I wanted to launch a startup, and this was 2012, right? So you had IPOs, you had this, like Steve Jobs was, well, at that time dead, but he was alive a bit earlier. And I was really into that thing. I wanted to go into the tech world and change the world and make a difference. Essentially, exactly what I hate now, right? And but then, so I was applying to all these places, like Duolingo was, startups like that. But at the back of my head, I always thought, well, maybe I don't care.
Duolingo wasn't a startup at that point of time.
It was. I applied. I applied. It was not very well known, and I applied to be the graphic designer there. I don't think I had the skills, to be honest, so I didn't really get it. I mean, fair play. But then at the back of my head, I said, well, maybe what I really, really miss is to go to France. I didn't know how it was going to happen because I only applied to one master's program just because I thought why not, right? And then when I got in, I called my dad and I said, well, I've gotten in. And it was not the plan at all to go to France. And he's like, oh, cool, then you're going, aren't you? I said, well, it depends on the scholarship situation because, I don't have the money to go to France. And then I got the scholarship as well. And then I told my dad, I don't know what to do, which was a very stupid question. And he's like, what do you mean you don't know what to do? You're going to France. And that's how it happened. So I ended up back in the same university for a master's program in communication.
Okay. And, but you said you never will go back to the same university, and you applied for a master in the same university.
Life, my friend, is full of contradictions.
There is no other universities in France, or what?
No, because having been an undergraduate or having been there gives you an advantage that they know you. And I mean, it's not like I didn't like the courses. I liked the people and the environment there. So I thought, well, and this master's program looked a bit rock and roll. Communications, international.
What was it? about?
It was communication. It was communication, political communication. It was digital communication was starting at the time. So unrelated to UX UI. Yeah.
So communication in terms of general communication, like in how to communicate specific things in specific sectors, or
well, I mean, most people went on to become sort of like strategic planners at agencies or chef de projet, project managers at agencies, and but thankfully, because of my history with interactive design, I went into UX quite by chance as well. Most of the things that have happened in my life have been by chance. So
well, I think that's a pattern on everyone's life in general. Yeah,
actually, yeah. But yeah, so that was the situation in France, and I went back there, and and I just felt a home there. Paris became my home.
Cool. Sounds nice. So with this Paris became my home, I will propose to you to grab another drink.
I was gonna say, actually, just sounds like a plan.
We come back.
All right, cheers.
So yeah, we are back. We were just talking about your master and how did you end applying to the same university that you didn't want to go and say like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why the reason why it was because you were liking Paris and you were liking the people and you were liking the people in the university. It was more about the academical portfolio or approach on the studies that you were not that agree with.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was exactly that. And luckily this master's program was, I mean, I loved it, but it was academically not very rigorous. It was they've got like the academic masters and a professional masters or professionalizing masters. That's what they called it in French anyway. So it was it was extremely sort of industry focused. So it wasn't academically challenging, which, you could see as a negative, but I saw it as a positive because it gave me more time to spend with other people and get to know the city, which was really my goal. It wasn't really to learn communication. So it worked out. I'm not really doing a very good sort of advert for the program.
No, definitely not. But I mean, you end communicating with the city if everything is communication.
It's a very easy out. I like that.
So the master was 2 years?
2 years, yeah. It was 2 years with, it was a year and a half because the last 6 months was an internship, wasn't it? So, yeah.
Okay, so No, I mean, the internship
is part of the 2 years. Yeah, it's called stage de fin d'études. And stage de fin d'études just means like the last 6 months are spent. I mean, it's a choice. You don't have to do it. I did it. You can also just do the stage between the first and second years. And do, I forget the word for it. It's there was a term for that when you break it up and split it into two. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get it over with and then, make money. Paris was bloody expensive, man. I wanted money.
It's an expensive city, definitely.
So
the last 6 months so you made a year and a half and then 6 months. It was like internship practice, whatever.
Yeah. It's the first time I professionally worked in sort of the capacity of a UX designer, or in that case, I was a UI designer.
Okay. So you entered from a communication master into a UI position.
Not technically.
From a person who doesn't know what UI means, it's more like the visual part of the digital design, let's say like this.
Exactly. So I was essentially doing sort of the visual design of websites essentially at the time.
Okay.
But I didn't, the role wasn't even UX or UI. It was just, what was it? It was a digital planner. I mean, it didn't really have a very fixed title. I'll be honest with you. The person who owned the agency was one of my teachers. That's how I got the internship.
That's always something that happens in the masters and the universities, definitely. Great. So you were saying I will not go back to that university, but you were already in love with Paris and the ways of doing Paris at that point of time. So did you kind of knew that you will stay there for a long time, and it was your objective to stay in France?
No, not at all, not at all. I expected to stay there and then, figure things out. Like, I wanted to work there, obviously, spend some time in Paris. But certainly my goal, if you had told the younger me, sort of, you're going to spend, 9 years in Paris and become French, I would have laughed at the idea because it was so removed from reality. But that's what ended up happening, of course. I just stayed. I mean, I loved it.
What happened? You entered this 6 months internship, and then what? You just continued in that same company? You switched?
No, I didn't. No, I switched. I because it was actually the 6 months were not, if I remember correctly, the 6 months were not the last 6 months. It was 6 months, and I had 6 months of courses left. It was the first part of the last year, so I had to go back and go back to my courses. I finished it and got a job at a company called Neuron at the time. I say at the time because the company doesn't exist anymore. And then that was my first official UX position as a full-time person. And I started working there, and the work environment is where really you get to know real society. Sort of real, because before that it was very much a student sort of world. I mean, already the internship was a good start, but there's a difference when you're an intern and you're a full-time employee. And I just sort of, it was interesting because most of my friends, my really close friends, were international. I mean, to the point where the flatmate that I live with now is a flatmate I met at my university in France. So we went to the same, So by chance, again, that seems to be the pattern. We now live in the same building, house, apartment thing. But I had a mix of very international friends from my university, and then friends I started to make through work, and then you discover another side of French culture, the side of French culture that's very bon vivant. It's the food, the jokes, the language, the conversation. That comes after.
Okay, so it just evolved to something like, okay, from the student life, which is student life at the end. I completely agree with that. Like, you are a little bit more like free, or you are a little bit more like less binded to thing, or you pay less attention to more stable stuff, like a good conversation or a good whatever. You then start working in Paris. And this became 9 years of your life, so it's not it's not a short time.
No,
it was like only like at any point you were thinking, okay, I just want to go. I mean, not right now, you're in Germany, so at some point you thought that you wanted to move somewhere else, but we will come to that later. What made you stay in France for 9 years?
Oh gosh, that's I told my friends that I would move to Berlin, I think about 6 years ago. I told my friends because I love the city, and quite a few of my friends had moved here. And initially I didn't, and to be honest, initially there were lots of things about Paris I didn't like. But once you grow up there, you spend so much time there that that becomes your home. And for someone, I mean, you can relate to this, who's lived in multiple places, home does not have the same meaning as the place where you came from. It's where you feel the most comfortable, and that became Paris over time. And I'm going to turn the question around. What's the city that you've lived in for the longest, apart from the city of your birth?
Then I suppose it will be Barcelona.
And that was how many years?
That was less than 5 years, 3-4 years.
But 3-4 years. But I bet even in those 3-4 years, whilst you were there, you felt very, very much at home. Or not? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but the thing is that I was coming from a situation where I was not feeling comfortable in the city that I was before. So I was already escaping more or less from not from a city itself, from a situation where I was Well, when I needed to change, so yeah, Barcelona was already. I think from the first. I mean, I was already studying in Barcelona before going to live to Barcelona, so I had already my life in there. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, I eventually considered my home in Frankfurt in Germany over that years. I eventually will consider Athens my home, probably. Yes.
Yeah.
I completely understand that once you consider a place your home, it's much more difficult to break with it because there is much more things that they are binding you to that place. That's normal. That's what the human connections at the end does, no? Like friends, exactly. Job, or whatever.
But you're right. No, but you're right. I mean, in fact, well, the biggest thing. I mean, I genuinely loved my job, which is not. I mean, it's very. It's a position of privilege to be able to say that, but it was true. I absolutely loved my job. I looked forward to going to work. I mean, obviously there were projects I didn't really enjoy.
Like everywhere, like everyone, yeah.
Like everywhere, yeah. But I genuinely liked my job, and even the one before, the one now we're colleagues. But even the one I left, the last one I had in Paris, I absolutely love this place, and the people. And I think that was the biggest thing because, it's over the course of those 9 years, I'd made friends who were extremely close, and it was very, very difficult to leave Paris. Also because, in some ways, you don't want to be away from these people that you care about and that have become in obviously they're not family in the traditional sense, but they become that, right? When you have lived abroad, you latch to these things because they mean so much to you. And so Paris had become that. And so you have your rituals. So, at the time, I had groups of people. I had the Swedish group with whom, we would speak mostly English and a mix of Scandinavian. Mm-hmm. You had, obviously my French group, mostly people from work. And then I had my university group, and that was sort of mixed French and international. So French, Russian, mostly French and Russian actually, and then Chinese as well, obviously. So I say obviously, it's not that obvious to the listeners. Hello. Hello to you and Ye if you're listening to this. So the thing is, so you have those multiple groups and you negotiate that, and then you're constantly playing with your identity. It's very interesting when you're someone who's from Nepal, whose primary language is English and is becoming French. It's a very odd place to be. It's a very unique place to be.
Even with that, I mean, you went and you landed to France with an advantage language. You landed into France in an advantage of you already been there for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then the work context will start you to bring like friends, or you started to create a community. One of the questions that I normally ask to the guests in this podcast is if you can tell me one of the things it's like the hardest of living in a country, or the and the best moment that living in a country, moment or thing of living in a country. I think France is it's the one that you live the most time of it, and at the end you are by nationality French right now. So I think
only French.
Only French.
Only French. Yeah, Nepal doesn't allow. They don't allow it.
They don't allow to have double nationality?
No, they don't. Yeah.
Okay.
They don't know that yet. Well, now they know if they listen to this podcast, but they don't know. Technically, the Nepalese government doesn't know that I'm French, but the constitution says that that's the rules. Yeah.
And until now, I didn't have any Nepalese listener, but that will be interesting. If now I have an increase,
you're gonna get some now. It's gonna get. They're gonna get the
Nepalese government asking me questions. Alert Nepalese government.
I'll just say something in Nepalese to calm them down. So right, so that's
exactly what he said.
There we go. But sorry, what was your question?
The question was hard and best moment situation in a city like France, just before jumping to the nationality and things, because I think it's really interesting topic also.
Yeah. Okay. So as you know, I love talking about sort of depressing things or dark things. It's one of really, I love it, because people, the society is so much, loves talking about only the happy bits. But I like, so it's, I mean, obviously, you always, I mean, towing a line. So you will know this because you said Frankfurt became your home, but Frankfurt was also a city where the primary language was German. Mm-hmm. So you can feel very much at home, but there can be very small interactions in which you totally miss all context, right? And then you're like, what? So you can relate to that.
Yeah.
And so the hardest part, I would argue, is, I wouldn't argue this actually. It's, I'm not entirely sure what's going to come out of my mouth as I say this, but I think the hardest part was, sometimes there's a part of you that's trying to integrate. That's part of you trying to sort of live in a way that is the normal for that city, right? Mm-hmm. And there are times when, you might be tired, you might be overwhelmed, and then you just want to go back to what's comfortable. And for me, that was English. And that was sort of not having to, so being with friends with whom you don't have to necessarily think about that language sort of barrier. And language is often not but language barrier is a very, very common phrase. But for me, language is often an enabler more than a barrier in most cases. Mm. But there are times when you want to express something. You're in a group, in a social situation. You want to express something. You want to integrate because that's a very human desire to want to feel part of whatever social context you're in. And you can't. You simply can't because you realize, well, don't have the rights. You might even have the words. You might even have been able to do that on another day when you were less tired. The language might just flow. But in that particular moment, you can't. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can try, but it will be constantly frustrating because you cannot be a part of the social group that you aspire to be a part of. I think that was the hardest part. And that happened quite often.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a normal common pattern. Like, I think it also happens like a lot of times we reflect other things and other things becomes much difficult because of communication. I think it's something that it recurrently appears in this podcast, and it's starting to be a pattern inside of this, like language barriers and communication standards and everything. Because of course, if you don't speak the language where you are going to live, even if you can live with it, like in a country like Greece, putting the example of where I am right now, people speak English,
right?
Crazy. But bureaucratical processes are Greek. And people who are working for these bureaucratical processes are Greek. So your daily life in Greece, it's absolutely going to be perfect in English because everyone, even like the really old people, has quite good English.
Really?
Nearly everyone. Yeah.
That's crazy.
They only put subtitles in Greek, but the original versions, all these kind of things affect, of course.
Changes everything.
But it can frustrate you. I mean, it frustrates in processes, like, for example, official things or documentation, and you receive like a paper in Greek or in French at that point of time where you were there, and you don't understand something because it has more complex language and everything. And this really brings a frustration to the people. But at the end, you ended speaking really good French, so you ended adapting to it.
Yeah, actually, I mean, it goes back to what you said earlier. Actually, you said that if you're able to make someone laugh or understand a joke or make a joke in a foreign language, that's when you've sort of passed a certain threshold or made sort of progress beyond a certain point. It's like when in a game you've gone on to another level. And I think that in France, the initial thing was humor, right? So my humor is very much it's very punny. It's like okay, anyway, it's very sort of based on language, playing with language. French humor is also like that, but there's a lot of references to films and events in the past or books, things like that, and we don't have that cultural sort of capital. You're not able to participate. And that's one of the reasons that French culture is sometimes a bit difficult to access. It's not the case I would argue that German humor is easier to access, even though, of course, German humor is also, has that cultural capital, but a lot less, and to people wondering, the Germans can be really funny. I mean, it's not, you can probably, attest to that.
Yeah, that's, well, in my experience, doing stand-up comedy in Germany, it was not about the people being funny. It was more like the people reacting to your jokes or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's more like the opposite of it. It's harder to get an audience in Germany, and that's just a personal opinion in here, or from my personal experience. Just going back to the question, as you said, hardest moment, communication in terms of like moments where going introduced to the communication in a country like France. Best moment that you remember for this country, like the best or the most feeling thing that you can remember?
Well, yeah, it's not one moment, but it's a series of things. I think that I genuinely started feeling at home when, obviously, obviously when you live in France, you speak French. That's how the people are most comfortable with French. And I reached a point where, I wasn't speaking a foreign language anymore. Of course, it's my third language, technically, more my second in terms of my everyday life. But you reach a point where I remember one of those moments where I thought, wow, this is crazy. Is I was very, very tired. It was during the Corona lockdowns in Paris, which were quite harsh. I was Skyping with a friend, Zooming, but it sounds weird to say I was Zooming with a friend. And at one point, I was very, very tired.
For you or for millennial people? Sorry, but that sentence was like, does people after 2000 know what Skype is anymore?
Gosh, yeah. I don't know. In my generation, the word Skype became the verb to have a video call.
Having a Skype call, Skyping.
How do the young people say it now?
I don't know. I have no idea, really. Like,
so you're very much outside of that in the same way I am. Cheers to that, mate. The thing is, it's there was a moment when I was very, very tired, and so this was a friend. Hello to Lucy, whom I was normally when I'm tired I switch to English, don't I? And I said, and with this particular friend, we speak both languages, and I told her, hey, I'm really, really tired. Do you mind if we just speak in French? Because it was just more comfortable for me at that point. And I think one of the best moments, is or was or have been, depending, those moments when you're with your very, very close friends, because French people are very much into sort of spending a good time together, right? So you have apéro, you have a glass of wine or a few glasses, if you're like my friends. You have your charcuterie, you have your cheese, whatever. It doesn't matter, and you're just having a good time together. An evening after work, perhaps, and you're complaining about, like, a huge time. A huge portion of that time is spent complaining about things. But that's all right. You're with people. You don't have to question whether you are acting correctly or not. And initially when you go to a new city, you worry about these things. Am I saying the right things? Am I pronouncing things correctly? Is this a cultural faux pas? And then you reach a point where you don't care about these things. You're in the company of very good friends, and you've integrated that language into your psyche to the point where it becomes second nature. And you just say, well, this is not how I expected things to turn out, but this is quite lovely. And sort of, it's not a particular moment, but that whole thing to me. It's a very weird way to say it. I don't talk like this usually in a very sort of fluffy language, but I fell in love with the culture and the language and the people. You know what I mean? And that's something that was maybe the best part of it.
Nice. I mean, it's a big thing at the end. Were we coming back to making a place home? When you have this sensation, it happens much faster that you are able to do that in an easy way. Because if I put my example in Germany, for example, I didn't start feeling Frankfurt as home until I met Catherine, and I
right.
had a partner there who was from there and whatever. Yeah. But it was not an environment that drove me there. It was that, yeah, of course. Then I started living together with my partner. I was starting to do some kind of things, and that drove me to home. It's not anymore a place where my family is, where my friends are, whatever. It's something else. In your case, was like a kind of community thing that was not depending on one person, which is more or less a traditional family thing, let's say like this.
Right. Yeah. No, but you're right. But I mean, the common thread though is still it's the people, right? I mean, that it comes down to that. I mean, it's this connection, and that was why leaving was so hard, because it's leaving a city is very, very hard. And I'm doing a lot of I didn't plan to do shout outs, but I'm now doing shout outs. Well, this is a shout out to Maria, a very close friend of mine. And, and we were, she made fun of me for a very long time because, I was leaving Paris and I was leaving the city and she didn't like it. But for me, I didn't see it as leaving. I saw it as going somewhere. But of course, people who are my friends who are staying in Paris, it is a friend leaving. And so, the fact that she was, I don't know if she was angry, but she was not very happy I left in any case, let's say it like that, was lovely. It was absolutely lovely that she was very angry very disappointed that I was leaving. I mean, these are words that's my interpretation of it, but that just means that you've got friends that are so close that makes it hard to leave a city when you've got friends that are that close.
I mean, that's the kind of relation that you want to pursue, like you want to maintain over time. I had a lot of friends who, when I left Barcelona, we stopped talking over some time, and that was all. Like, the people who were sad for me to leave Barcelona are the people who I still have contact with. The people who are, when I left Frankfurt, they were saying, okay, I'm sad for you to leaving, and I'm happy at the same time. So this is the sensation that they had at that moment of time, the dichotomy of saying, hey, man, you're having a new opportunity that is amazing for you, but it's sad for the relation that we have. These are the people that you are maintaining, and that's the valuable people at the end, no?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, and this is why I go back to Paris still every few months. I'm going to go back in February. And you've got friends. Like recently, I was on the phone with Nina. Again, I'm continuing the
putting names.
Yeah. Otherwise, they'll kill me. I think it's not to be nice. It's self-preservation. And she was saying, so constantly asking me, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? Because that was one of the things. I mean, maybe it's a European thing. I don't know. It's hard to tell, right? But it takes time to make friends. It takes, compared to maybe initially, it's people might seem reserved, might seem a bit more, it's the classic example of they use a coconut, like hard on the outside, soft on the inside. Well, could also be brown on the outside and white on the inside.
That was used by Stefan like last episode, I think. No, 2 episodes ago. Yeah. By Danish people versus German people. So yeah.
Okay. Wait. What was the hypothesis there? That Danish people are a lot more coconutish than the Germans are, I would imagine. Or the opposite?
I don't think it. I don't remember if it was comparing it directly from German people, but he was saying something like there was 2 kind of people, like the ones who it's an outer shelf, and then once you break into it, there's soft inside, and the people who is soft from outside, but getting into the deepest things, it's hard. So yeah.
I mean, like, it's, this because I think I'm jumping the sort of skipping ahead here, but when we first met in person, right, we were hired by the same company, and the orientation week, like when we started talking to each other, and I remember we got a drink or 2 after work.
3 or 4, yes.
Yeah, all right, so a few drinks. Let's I mean, we weren't just talking about, we weren't making small talk. You were talking to me about your history and your childhood and how you grew up and the sort of stuff that you were up to, which you've talked about in the podcast where you were interviewed a little bit. You didn't mention everything. So it's that sort of conversation that really I enjoy, and so people my friends in Paris gave that to me, and I only took no. That's not fair, but it was a very nice sort of social environment, I think.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's just like from cultural. I think personally there is different kind of things. For example, there was this podcast episode with Alex, the last episode before yours, where he was explaining that he lived in other parts of Spain. And he considered, for example, that the Catalan people are way more reserved than other Spanish people. And I agree with that. Like if you go to other parts of Spain, they are much more open to explain things to you directly.
Right.
And it enters the personality. Of course, in this podcast, at the end, we generalize quite a lot because it's impossible to end. And it's about the experience of the guest and my own experience and having the chit-chat on it. I think there is two topics that I would like to talk about just before doing the typical last two questions that I ask everyone.
Go on.
First one, it's how did you get to have the French nationality? That's definitely a question that I want to have. And then the last one will be, you've been in Berlin for the last 6 months. Why you moved to Berlin? And how is Berlin compared to Paris? Because this is like two of the big capitals in there. Like, I want you to make a little bit of comparison between these two cities. I would love to, if you have like a little bit of comparison, not ones against each other, but a little bit more like what it's different.
Yeah.
Let's start with the French citizenship. Let's say like this.
Right. Okay. Now, so after having lived in France for a couple of years, after about maybe, I don't know when the thought sort of entered my mind that I could apply. I mean, once if you went to school in France, which I did, I say the word school, I mean college, the higher studies in France, it becomes easier to acquire the nationality. And I think I thought, well, I think it was always at the back of my mind, but at certain points, it became less of a formality and more something I really wanted to do. As in, there was a certain point where I thought maybe perhaps I could even allow myself to feel French. That was a huge jump in some ways, because after 9 years in a city, all your references, all the way you think, they're formed by that city and the country. And I keep talking about Paris, but of course I spent some time in other parts of France as well. Again, another shout out. I'm sorry. I'm not really sorry, but I think, like Kohali, one of my friends, introduced me to Bretagne in the north, and I discovered aviation there. So I started, flying because just, that was actually all her. Right. And some of my friends showed me the south of France as well. Well, actually I worked quite a fair bit around Toulouse. And the thing is, I just loved the city, the country. I just loved it, and the variation in it. And then there was that, and there was also sort of discovering Europe and Europeanness in some ways through my friends that were German and Swedes, and and that's partially because of one of my friends who worked in the European Parliament, that I got even more interested in what it meant to be European, and the fact that we have a European Parliament, the fact that you as a citizen can act obviously at a local level, but also at a European level. So I was thinking about all these things, and I thought, okay, I think I want to become French, both for cultural reasons, but also for administrative reasons. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that a French passport is nicer, more practical than having a Nepalese passport for traveling. That's just a fact. Definitely. But beyond that,
at least in the European Union. At least in that sense.
Yeah, but I think in most places.
Yeah.
I think in most places. Although I think Bhutan is one of the exceptions where if you have a Nepalese passport, you don't have to pay the monthly fee. I don't really know, but Anyway, but beyond that, for me, I reached a point where I felt more French, and I wanted to becoming French for me meant something more than just the passport. It meant something to me that sort of, that's one of the reasons I now have a second first name, Felix. It was part of sort of my, it made sense to me. It's a very odd decision. Even now, I still can't completely come to terms with it. But so the nationality thing was, okay, I'm going to apply for it. I did in 2019, I think. And it took about 9 months, 10 months for the application to be reviewed. And, 2018 is when I applied. And 2019 is when I got the interview and became French and had that conversation about cheese.
So what's the process? Let me just clarify something. I think if you agree, because of course we are running a little bit out of time, we will do something. We will just finalize the conversation about how you became French. And then we will record the second episode with you, if you agree with that, to talk about Germany once you have lived a little bit more in Berlin. So we can talk about the dichotomy of becoming French and emigrating from becoming French to a different country. If that's okay for you, then the question would be, what is the process? What brings you to become friends? Because I think it's really interesting. Like the last episode, we were talking about the visa process of a Macedonian person to become in the green card of a European Union in Spain. I think it's something that interests a lot of people.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with when to become French. It depends where you're from. Obviously, if you're from within the European Union, the process is simpler. As are most things if you're within, the union. So I was coming from what's called a third country, right? So from Nepal, any country not within the European Union. The advantage I had, as you mentioned earlier, was that I had sort of completed my higher studies in France. That helps. And if I go even further, and this is something I critique about France, is that if you go to a school like Sciences Po, you are given privileges that other people aren't. It's not fair. The fact that I went to Sciences Po should not make things easier for me than other people, but that is sort of the truth. So I benefited from it. I don't agree with it. Nevertheless, that helped me.
One question just before we continue with that. So until the point that you become French, what was your situation in France? So you needed to request a visa every X time, or you needed to...
right. Oh, that's a good point. I've completely forgot about that. Right. That's a good point. That's a really good... I've completely glossed over that. So I had initially, you have a yearly sort of visa as a full-time worker. You have it's not a visa. It's called the titre de séjour, which is your residence permit, right? And the titre de séjour is what the visa system doesn't really work that way in France, because the visa is just to enter, and your residence permit is what lets you stay.
So I had renovated,
and so I had one for a worker. Initially, it was limited to a certain region, Île-de-France, where Paris is, to a certain job title, so UX, and that was it. I couldn't change, and a certain employer. As the years go by, it changes. Then it says you can work anywhere in France, blah blah. And eventually, I got the 5-year visa, so I wasn't renewing every year. It was just a 5-year residency permits as
which is not a green card.
Not at all, because there is a European blue card, which is it gives you 10-year residency if you get it's a high paying job and a high demand job, something like this. I didn't even apply to this because I directly applied for the nationality within those 5 years, the time span. But I could have renewed those 5 years almost indefinitely if I wanted to. I could have constantly renewed it. But I wanted to vote. I like we've got elections next year in France. I wanted to vote. I wanted to sort of make that a bit more concrete, I think. And so I applied for the nationality directly. And you can apply for the nationality if you have lived in France for 5 years. But if you, regardless of what country you're from, as long as you can speak the language, you can prove that you speak French and all that. But in my case, since I'd gone to school in France, I could have done it after 2 years. I didn't. I applied after my 7th year in France. I wasn't in a rush, but I applied after my 7th year, I believe, 6th or 7th year in France. Yeah.
And then the process goes through the same like kind of immigration process that other non-European citizens might apply. Like you need to do this kind of cultural exams and language exams and everything.
But actually, I mean, if I'm completely honest, it's very, very. It's by a case basis. I'd done the exam many years ago when I had considered applying earlier, but the exam was already sort of expired. The results were expired. I don't know what that makes. I mean, how can results expire? I don't know, but it had. And when I applied for real this time, I just showed them my diploma and the fact that I'd taken courses in French, and that was enough to prove the language. And of course, the interview, obviously, if you say you can speak French and they interview you and you can't, that's not very good. But you send all your documents. I had to actually, since I'd lived in the US, I had to get, and this is crazy, a document from the FBI saying that I was not a criminal. That didn't have a record with the FBI. So this is crazy that I had to ask. I'm crazy. I mean, but the FBI, I mean, I almost wish that they had something to say about me, but that would be terrible. But you kind of want to be known. And so you do that. You submit all the paperwork, and shockingly,
sorry, but since Trump, you're belonging to an Antifa group and you're a terrorist, so it doesn't really matter. You have everything in FBI right now.
Oh gosh, I remember that story you told me about the T-shirt. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, we'll maybe now episode 2 we'll get into that. No, but yeah, no. So you apply, you send all the documents, you get called for an interview, and that was the interesting bit because you in the interview they can ask you things like they asked me a couple of things about France, about the history, about the laïcité, which is there's a hard. Does the word exist in Spanish? Laïcité. It's like separation of church and state, essentially.
Yeah. I don't know how to translate it in English, actually. Yeah,
it's secularism, but it's not. Yeah, secularism is not quite. It doesn't quite englobe all the aspects of it. But we talked about the 1905 law that made laïcité, that made France laïque, of course, except Alsace. That's another story. But and then we talked about that, and then the lazy asked me to name every single French president in the Fifth Republic in order. When I told her I went to Sciences Po, she said, "Well, you went to a political science college. You should know this." I did, but that was I wasn't prepared for that question. Really, I didn't expect that. Yeah. She asked me to list
name every single president of France. President or
Fifth Republic?
First.
No, presidents. Yeah. So since De Gaulle, right? Don't ask me to do it now because I think I'll get the order wrong. I obviously know all of them, but I might get the order wrong.
Obviously, that's not obvious. Like if you ask me maybe there are Spanish ones, I can tell you them I will mistake them on the Catalans. Yeah. I don't know if I'm able to do that.
I mean, most people can't. I mean, even most people who are natural, so born citizens can't. It's not. There aren't very many.
That's my point. Like, why they are asking you this question? Like, what is this like the point of being a?
No. She said to be fair, she said this was beyond. I mean, she asked. I mean, she told me it doesn't. Your answers, if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. She was having fun, essentially.
Okay.
The interview is so
I'm having fun with your citizenship. That's bullshit. Sorry, like what the hell?
No. To be fair, okay, I'll tell you. Okay, this will make more sense when I tell you how the interview was set up. And so the lazy, invited me to the little booth where she goes through the documents. First 15 minutes spent to make sure all the documents are in order, right? So she's the agent in charge. She checks if there are things missing. And actually, there were some things missing. And she just asked me to email it to them, like literally take a photo of it with my phone. I mean, it was crazy for France. And so we do this. And interestingly, at one point we talk about quite early in the interview, she's like, so, do you know what the national anthem of France is? I mean, yeah, okay, La Marseillaise, okay, they didn't ask me to sing it. Sometimes they do. Yeah. I mean, I love it.
Like a football player.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, the football players famously didn't sing it, so it was a problem.
Yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I didn't have the choice, but I mean, she didn't ask me. And then she asked me a couple of other questions. But then at one point she asked me, so like, do you know anything about, French food? And I was like, well, do I know anything about French food?
That's the only thing that I know.
I know, it's the only thing I know. And food and drink, right? And then I started talking about it. And then I said, well, I can name you some dishes that I really, really like. And I did. But I said, I'd rather talk to you about cheese. And ears just sort of, perked up. I said, oh, what about cheese? And then, and we talked about cheese for a bit. And I said, I have my favorites. Don't know if you have yours. She said, what is it then? And I said, there's a cheese called Faubourg d'Ambert. It's a blue cheese from Auvergne. From the central region of France. And the Faubourg d'Ambert is a lovely, lovely cheese. It's slightly sharper than say, for example, a gorgonzola. But you can use it in cooking as well. Like, it's a lovely cheese. I think once I mentioned that, she wrote in a file, done, he's French, close the file, approved. And everything after that was just for fun. And at that point,
approved by cheese.
Approved by cheese. Yeah, that's an official thing in France, by the way. Yeah, approuvé par le fromage. It's an official seal. Yeah, it's like that'd be brilliant. Approved by cheese. So yeah, I went, and then the thing is, like, after that, she just was having a conversation. She wanted to make it quite light, and so she was just essentially joking about, since you went to a political science school, can you answer this? And she told me right off the bat, it doesn't matter if you can't, because most people can't. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So that was the process of becoming French.
Yeah. Don't ask me about the ceremony. Don't tell me about the ceremony was shite. It was the shittiest ceremony you've ever had. But yeah, anyway. Yeah, that's this.
We are running out of time for this episode.
Yeah, we are.
Actually, we are past the time normally, so that's a good one. Just keeping in mind that we will keep Germany for the next time. We will make the transition between becoming a French and immigrating again. So you renew your homeland officially and immigrate to Berlin. I have two questions that I ask everyone. First one, it's any recommendation that you will say to people who want to immigrate to the countries where you have immigrated to?
Okay, I'll answer that very quickly. I think if you are going to France, then people have lots of, this applies to anything, but preconceptions about France. Have them, that's fine. But once you're there, just give it some time. It takes some time before you're able to really understand things. And not everything is logical in France. Not everything is good in France. There are lots of things that I criticize about France that you, of course, can criticize as well. But if you really want to appreciate French culture and the French people, give it some time. It takes time. And if you are willing to do that, I think it'll be worth it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I think it applies to a lot of places, but yeah, I think there is some prejudices against France in a lot of, like, especially countries surrounding it, and it's worth it to get in it and explore it, like, at least.
Cheese eating surrender monkeys is what we're called.
Last question. Any project that you want to promote? I know you have a podcast, so don't tell me that you don't have any project to promote. Okay. Anything that you are working on? I think you have enough personal things.
Go on. I think you know what I'm going to say, don't you?
Yeah.
Go on then. All right. Yeah. All right. So I've got a podcast. If you're into aviation, so I'm talking about general aviation, so private pilots, stuff like that. If you're interested in flying, I've got a podcast. I've got a podcast called podcast. Yeah, I can't speak anymore. I've got a podcast called Ground Effects Aviation Podcast. It's on all major sort of platforms. You can go listen to it. And you allow me, I've also released a new electronic music EP. My music project is called Snow Circuits. That's snow, like, snow that you get in December,
like
in some places.
Thing.
And oh gosh, bloody hell! Why'd you do that, man? Not like the Colombian thing, like snow and circuits, like a circuit board. I'm going to ignore what you just said. and the album is called, the EP is called Thought Machine. So if you like electronic music, or you know what, even if you don't like it, go on, try something new for once. Go on then.
Definitely. I mean,
there you go. That's all.
We will put it without the Colombian thing in the recommendations. Both of the projects.
You can't, now you've said it again, so you can't remove it. So just keep it in.
The Colombian thing, it will be the title of the LP.
Great. Thank you. And also I would like to also, promote, world peace, and, we, there you go. World peace.
Here we come back to the hippies of the United States.
Yeah.
We will put that 2 projects in the social media
links. Yeah.
And if you definitely are into aviation, just go to Parimal Podcast. I listen to it. I'm not into aviation, and I still listen to it, so it's doable.
I was an American accent, by the way, in most of my podcasts. So I'm going to change it eventually, because I feel like I'm faking it. But I have, yeah. So if you want to hear my American accent, that could be an advertising sort of thing, couldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. If you are into American accent, go to the aviation podcast of Parimal Satyal. If you are not into American accent, go to the Snow Circle LP of Parimal Satyal.
Circuit, not circle. Circuit, damn it.
Circuit.
There we go. One of the two.
Thanks a lot for this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
And cheers.
Cheers.